This video is brought to you by Discard. Welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion. In 2009, a man by the name of James Howells proved himself to be a visionary. He started mining Bitcoin before anyone else had ever heard of it. James managed to stockpile centivilled Bitcoins when they were just a fraction of a cent per coin. Eventually, his girlfriend made him stop. She thought that the computer doing the mining was quote getting too noisy. James later ended up throwing the hard drive in the trash. And today this mistake cost him over $4 million. To get your money you would need that hard drive. Yeah, there's a specific file on that hard drive called a wallet file which the Bitcoin is stored in. And without that file there is no way of getting the money back because there is no central server that records a log of it. In 2009, Hangix bought 2 pieces for Wise Lady Bitcoin or about typhus. At the time it wasn't the first transaction in Bitcoin but certainly the most widely publicized. Unfortunately today, these delicious pizzas cost him $500 million. Is it true some people celebrate the anniversary of the day you bought the pizza? Yeah, my twisted Bitcoin pizza day, so it's called Bitcoin pizza day. It is its stories like this that make Bitcoin such a fascinating phenomena. Its growth and adoption, at least over recent years, has been mind-blowing. But the story of how Bitcoin came to be is just as interesting. Despite Bitcoin's young age when compared to traditional stores of value, the fundamental ideas behind crypto may be older than you think. So the question has to be asked, where did Bitcoin actually come from? Who is the mysterious individual who invented it? Sit back, relax. In this 2-part series, we'll find out. You are watching Cold Fusion TV. For many, Bitcoin is still considered a fad, a Ponzi scheme, something that would disappear as quickly as it made realized. The cryptocurrency has its fair share of bad reputation through fake crypto frauds such as BitConnect and OneCoin, not to mention payment for narcotics on Silk Road. What's happening is there's all these copycat cryptocurrencies that are going out there, and there's no regulation on the actual level of Bitcoin itself. You're talking about this futures regulation, but the underlying asset is completely unregulated. It's a dark market. Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which if it succeeded would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. But the word is starting to get through that Bitcoin is much more than that. People are starting to look at our economic system with increasing skepticism. Currency is continuously being created. Food prices and bond yields are rising, hinting at inflation, and knowing that the long-term value of all fiat currencies over the last few thousand years has tended towards zero. It's only natural to think that there might be some issues ahead. I've outlined financial problems, specifically in my How Money is Created video, which all of you really enjoyed, but it clearly highlights that there's a need for new thinking on the topic. Friedrich Hayek, winner of the Nobel Nobel Prize in Economics, stated the following in Miniature: I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again. Before we take the thing out of the hands of government, all we can do is by some slightly round-out way introduce something that they can't stop. End quote. While it's undeniable that Bitcoin is not perfect, it broadly achieves this goal, and as you soon see, it can be stopped. So before we continue, it's probably wise to have a quick primer on Bitcoin. I first talked about Bitcoin on this channel back in 2003, and since then we've done a whole bunch of episodes on Bitcoin and blockchain. But for those that are new, here's a quick summary. When you pay a shop using a bank card, the shop checks with the bank to see if you have money to make the purchase. The bank checks its records, verifies that you have enough money, and deducts that amount from your card. It then updates its records and takes a fee for providing their services. If you wanted to remove the banks from the system, who would you trust to keep the records straight, no altering or cheating? No one would ever trust a single person with that much power. But you may give your trust to a collective group of people, many millions, In fact, the main idea is to not have a centralized record of transactions. Many copies of those transactions are distributed across the world. Every owner of each copy records every transaction. In this new model, the shop, instead of checking with the banks, checks with everyone's records to see if you have the money. When the purchase is made, all the record keepers update their records. If an individual transaction record is fraudulent, it doesn't agree with the rest of the copies of the transaction records and just rejected. This large group of people checking record transactions aren't people at all, but a network of computers. There is no need for third parties such as banks because the decentralized network keeps itself in check. Amazingly, that means no bans, no server shutdowns, or blocking of payments because payments occur directly between people. Although transactions can be tracked, they cannot be stopped. So-called miners keep the network running by solving complex equations on their computers. These people mine Bitcoin in chunks, called blocks, that contain all of the recent transactions. Blocks are kind of like a page in a record-keeping book. The miners receive payment in Bitcoin for their effort, much like mining gold. Also, like gold, there's a finite supply of Bitcoin to stop it from being devalued. Much like we're currently seeing in fiat currency, there will only ever be 1 million Bitcoins, and the final Bitcoin will be mined in to force it. So what gives Bitcoin its value in reality? It's just worth what someone's willing to pay for it. So could the price drop to zero if confidence is lost? Yes, it's possible, but regardless, it is a pretty interesting idea. There is an argument to be made that the value of Bitcoin is actually the trust and utility of the Bitcoin network itself. What the price is for that value, no one is sure yet. So yeah, I think a really useful idea. A blockchain is just a type of database. It's a distributed ledger that in some use cases, like for a banking back office, is kind of like a database upgrade. So massive improvements in efficiency, but probably not that transformative or disruptive. When you take a blockchain, you make it public and decentralized, and then you add money to that. You add a cryptocurrency. Then you're looking at something that is that first use case, that offshore banking system that I think is fundamentally disruptive, and disruptive financially, economically, and even potentially politically. So how's Bitcoin maintained? Bitcoin is open source, so anyone can edit the code. It's a misconception that the code has stayed the same for the past 1 years. There is maintenance carried out to ensure smooth functioning. This is done through a Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, or BIP. A BIP is just a document that proposes code changes, but to stop someone from inserting some code that says if every Cold Fusion viewer 1,000 Bitcoin, there needs to be 95 consensus across the last two Linus miners. Basically, it's a digital voting system. On January 39, the first block of Bitcoin was mined. Within this very first block, a special message was written. It read, quote, "The Times, 3rd of January, 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. This gives us a clue to Bitcoin's purpose for existing. A response to a broken financial system." Just 9 days after the first block was mined, the first Bitcoin transaction is completed. It was between Bitcoin's creator Satoshi Nakamoto and another cryptographic enthusiast, Hal Finney. It was a healthy sum of wise Bitcoin, worthless at the time as there were no exchanges to determine a price. Satoshi Nakamoto would announce his invention of a new economic system on a cryptography mailing list on July 9, 2009. Hal Finney would help Satoshi fix bugs and improve security in those early days. Music. While these steps mark Bitcoin's creation and the first instance of application, this is by no means the beginning of Bitcoin's story. For that, we must travel back over to the cast to the year Miniature Music. In 983, American cryptographer David Chom is already experimenting with the idea of electronic cash. He was part of a movement known as the cypherpunks. They were activists who defended the idea of using cryptography and computers as a powerful tool to protect the privacy of individuals. If you were to pilot it into political terms, they were kind of like digital libertarians, wanted to create a safer and more anonymous transaction system. His efforts led to the invention of the blind signature protocol, breaking ground and what would become known as the foundations for modern blockchain technology. I created a whole concept for how you could use eCash to make your payments, and then the blind signatures could be used to basically prove things out you without revealing who you are. Classics, they have kids at a bar and they want to, or somewhere they want to jet in, they would say to prove that they have either old and know, or there they have a driving license, or they're from a different state or whatever, but they don't want to give their address and all this other stuff. Well, that's what you could do with the credential mechanism. In the years that followed, David Chen began building his idea of a workable cryptographic electronic money system, and in 1989, the company DigiCash was born. A notable employee at DigiCash was cryptographer Nick Szabo. Nick would go on to be influential in the early crypto space, but more on him later. In 1999, DigiCash launched their eCash system, a product that enabled the safe and anonymous transfer of money over the internet. eCash was David's answer to what he considered to be the extremely unsafe practice of using credit cards online. According to insiders at the time, eCash was a technically perfect product that resolved many of the issues that came with credit card payments, such as security concerns and fees. Despite his good intentions, what David was doing was risky at the time because the US government sensed a threat. A number of my colleagues and friends had secrecy order placed on them by the United States government, which made it a federal crime to reveal what they were researching. But to apply that to cryptography seemed a bit out of range. The National Security Agency, which is our main cryptographic authority in the United States, for protecting secrets and breaking codes, they got a new director, and he started writing letters to all the scientific associations, telling them that they should not have conferences or even sessions at conferences that covered cryptography. I felt it was just too important, so I risked spending the rest of my life in jail to set cryptography free. Digital cryptography was so frowned upon that some early crypto enthusiasts had to smuggle code through shirts or tattoos. Much like Bitcoin, the eCash product began gaining incredible levels of attention from buyers. At the height of the hype, David Chom was contacted by none other than Bill Gates. Gates wanted to integrate eCash into every copy of Windows 9. It's rumored that he offered $1 million for the project. David Chom declined the offer and every other offer that came after that. According to ex-employees, David's stubbornness and paranoia made it hard for him to trust the intentions of those interested. He also assumed that there will be better offers around the corner. He wanted eCash to be perfect. He believed in the importance of his work. In 1996, he stated, quote, "The difference between a bad electronic cash system and a well-developed digital cash will determine whether we have a dictatorship or a real democracy." Infighting, David eventually lost control of DigiCash and the company fell into the hands of external investors. DigiCash began pitching their products to banks, several of whom were interested, but the vast majority of banks at the time were conservative and would rather stick to lucrative credit cards rather than an experimental product. By 1998, DigiCash was bankrupt, signaling the end of the very first wave of digital currency. Before we continue, here's a quick word from today's sponsor, Discord. Discord is a place where our Cold Fusion community can get together and chat. Setting up the server was really straightforward and only took a couple of minutes. I've added separate chat categories for technology, business, finance, medicine, and future video suggestions. I've decided to use this because over time I've noticed that I've received a lot of interesting emails from professionals in industry and just awesome people in general who tell me interesting stuff that's going on in the tech world. So I'm sure bringing all of you guys together will generate some interesting and great conversation. I've been meaning to create a Discord server for a while, so when Discord reached out to me, I thought it was perfect, so come over and have a chat. It's free and takes just 5 seconds to join. Check the link in the description to get started. Music. It seemed like the world was just not quite ready for electronic crypto money, but this did not stop progressive thinkers from seeing potential in the idea. After all, it wasn't the idea that was bad, it was just well ahead of its time and had the added issue of having no strong leadership in '99. Famous economist Milton Friedman even said that, quote, an electronic cash was necessary for the newly found internet and was also a logical tool for limiting government overreach. I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash, a method where on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without a knowing B or B knowing A. He would go on to say that the monetary supply and monetary policy should be set by a computer where it could not be corrupted by humans. In the mid-1990s, the market exploded with companies that were based around cryptographic money. They were all riding the wave of attention that DigiCash had generated in '96. Even the NSA got in on the action. They published a paper titled, quote, How to Make a Mint, the Cryptography of Anonymous Electronic Cash. They described their own fairly impressive version of a cryptocurrency, but it proposed the need for a centralized bank to keep tabs on transaction records, going directly against the heart of the movement. The movement did continue, and before long some intriguing ideas began popping up on message boards. Some of these ideas were very valuable to what would later become Bitcoin. B-Money, for example, was designed by University of Washington graduate Y. Dai, published in '98. B-Money was designed as a way to enable online economies to exist entirely free from outside regulation. B-Money was ultimately theoretical and why popular. It never gained enough traction to become a reality. Other ideas within the online community were less helpful. Jim Bell's assassination politics essay, for example, in the essay, he proposed an encrypted currency system to be used by disgruntled citizens unhappy with their political representatives. Money could be anonymously donated to a pool until the amount was high enough for someone to accept the bounty and assassinate a politician. It was a concept that eventually led to Bello doing some prison time. In all of this chaos, the idea that stands out most in hindsight is Bitcoin, proposed by ex-DigiCast employee Nick Szabo in '98. Nick had the idea that instead of a digital currency being a token that represents fiat money, the digital currency itself could be a valuable commodity, and it would be awarded to miners for computing cryptographic equations. Sound familiar? Where Bitcoin differs from past atoms was the complete distancing from any reliance on banks. Nick Szabo explains, quote, I was trying to mimic as closely as possible in cyberspace the security and trust characteristics of gold, and chief among those is that it doesn't depend on a trusted central authority, end quote. If David Charms eCash was an early ancestor to Bitcoin, then Bitgold was the missing link, although it was an establishing building block for the future of cryptocurrencies. It was only theoretical and also flawed. For one, it had far less concern with privacy and also had some technical shortcomings when it came to mining. So along with B-Money, Bitgold was never widely adopted. So then, despite all of its exciting progress, the cryptographic money community fell relatively quiet for a decade. Then in August of 2008, the domain name Bitcoin. ARC was anonymously registered. In October, a paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, was posted to a cryptography mailing list. Cygnus Satoshi Nakamoto. In this paper, Nakamoto presented to the world the fundamental outline for Bitcoin. As it stands, this paper started a cryptographic chain reaction that changed the course of financial history. Today, nation-states want to start their own digital currencies. The city of Miami wants citizens to be able to pay bills in Bitcoin, to be able to offer our employees to get a percentage of their salary in Bitcoin, allows our residents to pay for fees in Bitcoin, and also would allow for our taxes to be paid in Bitcoin. It also a request of the state legislature to make Bitcoin an acceptable currency for us to potentially invest in the future. PayPal, MasterCard, and Apple Pay are now in trading Bitcoin. Tesla has bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, and General Motors is contemplating putting Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Large financial institutions are now accepting exposure to Bitcoin. What separated Bitcoin from past attempts was the overcoming of the double spending problem. Unlike physical stores of value, digital money is simply data, and data can be replicated. And this allows the potential spending of a single coin multiple times. In the past, this issue was solved by involving a trusted third party to oversee transactions. In the case of eCash, that third party was banks. But to Nakamoto, that defeated the point. And much like Nick Szabo attempted with BitGold, the intention with Bitcoin was to create, quote, a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust. Bitcoin succeeded in overcoming the double spending problem by implementing an updated record of who owns what and at what time, as discussed earlier. This was the birth and implementation of the blockchain. With the double spending problem solved, the system was brought online and tested, and it worked by 2019. Bitcoin was up and running in July of 2019. It began trading at a value of $8 and had risen to $8 by months. But of course, nobody really cared. Here's the very first Reddit post about Bitcoin. In 2019, it was downvoted the first reference of Bitcoin in TV history was the program Good Wife in 2022, when Bitcoin was at a price of $1. I went online and I bought one Bitcoin last night. Really, it's the future. I don't know. It didn't feel real, or real's gonna change. Just watch. Here's a talk about Bitcoin. Though an empty room in 2020. When was it $100? Literally nobody cared here. Neutrality in Bitcoin means being able to adopt Bitcoin in any culture, any language, any religion, any geography. But there were some believers too. Chamath Palihapitiya shares his views on Bitcoin at $5 owning that currency and allowing water to find its level, particularly in the developing markets, is huge. And if you don't think that this thing is going to rip when Brazil goes through a devaluation, when the Indian rupee continues to get crushed, when you have all of this money trying to get in and out of these countries where there's massive, political instability or monetary or financial instability, you're being naive. It doesn't matter what happens in the United States. It doesn't matter what happens in Japan. Doesn't matter what happens in the EU. It doesn't matter. It matters what happens in Argentina, in Venezuela, in Kenya, in Brazil, in India, in Russia, in China. And when you look at where all the activity is, it's in all of those markets. Yeah, this will be born out of a people's desire to have unfettered access to capital, despite finally cracking the code to a working electronic cash system. Satoshi Nakamoto has mysteriously chosen to remain completely anonymous. On April 2011, Satoshi Nakamoto would send his final verified email and vanish. Satoshi still owns 1 million coins which have never moved from his digital wallet. If the price of Bitcoin was to reach 9,000 euros, it would make him the richest person in the world. Saw Satoshi Nakamoto being such a Mysterious figure has full speculation and false claims. Who is Satoshi and why did he vanish? We'll explore this as well as some concerns about Bitcoin in the next episode, so thanks for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two in this episode. Be sure to check out the Discord and also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. My name is Digogo and you've been watching Cold Fusion. Cheers guys, have a good one. Music. Cold Fusion, it's new thinking. Music. You